Welcome to another segment of Sage Advice. This is the segment where I talk to Jeremy Crawford. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi there.
About fun mechanics in Dungeons & Dragons and any questions that you might have come up often around your table. And Jeremy is here to give you some clarifications as well as some of the intent behind the design. And today we are going to talk about targeting your spells in Dungeons & Dragons. And this is especially important because there are some new wrinkles in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that is coming out right now that many players are interacting with through previews, and we'll be able to get the full interaction when they have all of the content within the book. And so Jeremy and I wanted to delve into how to target spells and how it works and what the overview is, and then what some of the changes are with spells in Tasha. So Jeremy, why don't you give us the quick overview about how you target things with your spells in D&D 5th edition?
So spells have typically one of several different range notations in their description. The simplest version is you'll open up a spell and it will say range 120 feet, which typically means, if you then read down into the description of the spell, it might say, hey, you target somebody within range, and the spell needs to originate within that distance and affect that target. But I'm bringing up range first in our discussion of targeting because range and targeting are intermingled in our rules. If you go to the section in our spellcasting rules in the player's handbook about range, you'll notice it immediately starts talking about targeting, because range is all about how far away can the target of the spell be. So again, that's the simplest version. If, hey, my spell can affect someone or something that is X feet away. Well, this is D&D. Magic is wonderfully varied, so it doesn't stay as simple as that. Because then sometimes, rather than picking a single creature or a single object 120 feet away, 15 feet away, 300 feet away, whatever that range is, instead, a spell might create an area of effect, like this fireball spell, creating a big explosive sphere of fire, which must be created up to the number of feet away indicated in its range. Fireball then creates another wrinkle here, because in its description, it then also refers to the people who are caught in that explosion as the spell's targets. But if you look at our range text, it also says that point of origin is also in a way a target of the spell. So you and I are talking about this precisely because the game uses the word target in a variety of different ways. Mm-hmm. We try to just use it in a largely sort of English sense, but it appears in all of these technical contexts.
Right.
And then other effects in the game care about, like, number of targets for a spell, how far away are they, etc. So then we start getting questions. All right, there are even some more little nuances. Some spells have a range of touch, which means whatever or whomever you're affecting with the spell must be within reach. And we typically are imagining you're reaching out with a hand to touch them. But honestly, it could also be poke them with your foot, or you got them with your elbow. But typically in traditional D&D spellcasting, you reach out with your hand to deliver a touch spell.
I only heal with my elbow going forward. I think that's canon for my characters. Going, just, you got it, heal.
Yes, I love the idea of someone having this glowing elbow that eases all of our hurts.
The patron god of elbows has given me this power.
Yes. And then we also have some spells that have, where you look at the range entry and it says simply self, which means the spell in a range sense can go no further than yourself. And that also means you are targeting yourself, unless the spell says otherwise, because the spell might actually say, Well, you're infusing yourself with magic. So you're sort of the initial target, but we have spells with a range of self that then down in their text will then refer to you targeting also somebody else as a result of the magic that you have infused into yourself. But wait, there's more.
There's more.
There is also a range notation, which is self followed by a parentheses, which then usually describes an area. In that parentheses, it might say 10-foot radius. It might say 20-foot sphere. It might refer to a cube of a certain size. And there, what it's indicating is that the spell originates with you. It extends out from your space and then fills usually some kind of area, or its effect is limited to the area indicated inside the parentheses. Now, I mentioned before our rules on range and how they immediately start talking about targets. But when it's talking about targets, you'll notice in our rules that it talks about you targeting individual creatures or objects. It talks about targeting a point of space for one of the game's area of effects to suddenly bloom into being, whether that's a sphere, a cube, a cylinder, what have you. A line is another very common one. But you'll notice in the rules that when you get down to self parentheses, it doesn't actually talk about targeting anymore. And that's intentional. Instead, it just says, now we're in essentially what we were getting at there. And we definitely could have spilled more ink on this. And this is why we get questions on it. Whenever we get lots of questions on something, I'm like, we needed to write more words here.
Yeah,
and in some cases,
a clarifying sentence or two.
Yes. And in some cases, like this one, I have to point the finger directly at myself. I should have written some more words here.
You were trying to be too elegant and get it into the least amount of words as possible.
Yes. No, and that by the way, is always a line I'm trying to walk, because I love for rules to be concise, but sometimes the answer is not concision. Sometimes actually the answer is more words. And it was intentional that when you get to the part of our range rule that talks about that sort of self parentheses, the word target does not appear, because there we're dealing with an unusual set of spells that really have to define within themselves what actually is being targeted here. And there are actually some really iconic spells in the game with that self and then parentheses notation. Burning Hands has it. Lightning Bolt has it.
Color Spray? Is Color Spray one of those as well?
Yep. Because these are all spells that emanate from the caster. Whereas a spell that says, just say like range 10 feet, what that means is the point of origin of the spell's effect can come into being up to 10 feet away from you. And then if you use one of the things in the game that extends the range of a particular effect, because there are things like Spell Sniper and other effects in the game. There's a Warlock Eldritch Invocation that can fiddle with range. It can multiply that or extend it in some way, now suddenly meaning, that thing that was 10 feet away can now be 20 feet away, or even further, moving the point of origin further and further away. The reason why some of these spells have this self parentheses range is we are signaling to the reader, this point of origin cannot move. It must always emanate from you. You are the source of this magic. Now, of course, the spellcaster is always the source of the magic, but here we're specifically talking about the source of the effect that the spell creates. And sometimes you can cause that effect to actually come into being quite a distance away from yourself. Fireball being one of the classic examples of this. It can be way over there. So in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we have some spells that actually appeared in an earlier D&D book, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, that now reappear, and their range changed. And that change has naturally caused some questions. Their ranges originally were that simple X feet, meaning it could happen. The point of origin of the spell could happen over there. So these spells were spells like Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, which when you then read them, you see, wait a second, I'm actually making a weapon attack with these spells. And these were actually unusual spells when we wrote them because we had not yet created at that point spells that incorporated into themselves an attack. We had spells like the Paladin's Smite spells in the player's handbook that enhanced attacks, but did not include within them the weapon attack itself. Here we experimented with that. And to be totally frank, the original range entries were wrong.
Oh, really?
Yes. The reason why we changed them in Tasha's Cauldron when we decided to bring those spells forward along with the Blade Singer, because we wanted to kind of freshen them up and make them available to a broader audience, we were looking at the spells and realized these range entries are simply wrong because, like Burning Hands, like Color Spray, like Lightning Bolt, you swinging your weapon can never originate any farther away than yourself.
Right.
Because saying range X feet was simply an error, and so we fixed it.
Now they have a range of self with a parentheses
5 foot radius.
5 foot radius.
And then inside the spell you read, okay, you brandish the weapon you used as a part of the spell casting, and you target somebody within this radius to whack with that.
That makes sense because it's not a spiritual weapon. It's not a summoned weapon. It is using the weapon that the character is wielding on their own. And so that clarification makes a lot of sense. But how does this interact with metamagic, specifically twinning of spells?
So this does make the spell ineligible for being twinned because a twin spell does not allow you to twin a spell with a range of self. And because these ranges have the word self in them, they are not twinnable. And that's by design. Honestly, these never were meant to be twinnable because, again, their range was actually always incorrect. And it sometimes you'll have hindsight being 2020 and you'll look at something like, how the heck has this been out in the world this long? Because this range was just simply never correct. And actually, to be clear, only Booming Blade was twinnable under the old approach. Green Flame Blade was never twinnable because Green Flame Blade had the extra thing of you could target another person with it, and you can't twin something that can target multiple people. And so now Booming Blade joins Green Flame Blade in not being twinnable.
That makes a lot of sense now. The whole twinning idea seems much more like you're sending out two like rays of enfeeblement or something like that. Like that seems to make a lot more sense. Creating two blades out of nothing just seemed to go against the spirit of what the spell was trying to create.
Yeah, twin spell was designed to double things like Charm Person or sending out two rays of enfeeblement, like you said. It was never meant to like speed up your sword swings, like in this case.
Yeah.
It was an unfortunate accident that Booming Blade was twinnable because of the range being incorrect.
Got it.
But then people also have wondered, how do these interact with Warcaster, a feat that allows you to make an opportunity attack with a spell as long as you target only one thing with that opportunity attack. And so then the question is, well, can you use Booming Blade with its new range of self parentheses to make that opportunity attack as defined by Warcaster? The answer is yes. And the reason why, it goes back to what I was saying about our rules on range, where you'll notice that as soon as we get to the self parentheses part, we don't talk about you targeting yourself, because spells in this category, you have to look at the spell to see what exactly are you targeting, because all self parentheses tells us is some magic is extending out from me. We'll see who or what it's targeting. And in the case of Booming Blade, who or what's being targeted is the person you attack with it. Now, Green Flame Blade is an interesting corner case here. Green Flame Blade, and we've clarified in the new version of it, you decide when you use it if it's green fire jumps to another person. If you cause it to jump to another person, you can't use it with Warcaster, because Warcaster, you can only use it if you target the person who triggered the opportunity attack. So if you're willing to use Green Flame Blade and not have the fire jump, then yes, you can use it with Warcaster.
Oh, okay. And that's where I saw some of your clarifications about can and may
Yes.
in spells and other descriptions. It does not mean it absolutely must.
Oh yeah, when we put into a rule the word can, like you can do such and such, that is very purposeful. What that means is, like just like in regular conversation, that means you now have the ability to do it, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. Like we've essentially turned that on. You can push that button,
Right.
but that doesn't mean you must. It's up to you whether you do it.
It's very true. You can, poke yourself in the eye if you want to, but you don't have to.
Yes. Yeah. But I am, whenever these questions come up about targets and targeting and the interactions with different feats and class features, I'm always sympathetic, because it's definitely a case of in our effort, in our rules to use natural language as much as possible, we inadvertently, in this case, spawned a lot of questions, and that's always why I'm happy to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
To really help bring some clarity, and also, I've seen some speculation. Did we make these changes to those spells, for instance, to nerf certain combinations? No, actually, the main motivation was correcting the range, because it was never right.
Right. Getting the clarity that was meant to be there in the first place.
Yeah, because these spells do not allow you to detach your arm and have it X number of feet away slashing at somebody.
That sounds like a Warforged feature.
Yeah, and I even joked about that actually back when these spells first came out. I had some tweet about, if you combine these with, one of these effects that increases spell's range, that effect does not in the process elongate your limbs. And that was really me signaling, whew, we need to fix this range. And bringing these spells into Tasha's Cauldron was an opportunity for us to do just that.
Good. All right. Awesome. Well, I'm clear on this now. Hopefully, more people in the D&D community will be clear on this even before they get Tasha's in their hands and start playing with the newer versions of these spells as well as the subclasses. So, thank you for, as always, illuminating some of these discussions, Jeremy.
I'm always glad to do it.
If people want to or have more clarifying questions they need from you based on these subclasses or anything else within Dungeons & Dragons, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I can be reached on Twitter at Jeremy E. Crawford.
Excellent. I feel like every time I set you up, I'm giving more people, the advice and clarity they need. So I will never tire of sending people to your Twitter account.
Yeah, I always love seeing people's questions, and even when I don't have time to answer them on Twitter, they're still so valuable, because I'll read them, they'll inform the design that we do, and then they can also feed conversations that you and I have on shows like this.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you, Jeremy, as well as all the work you've been doing getting Tasha's Cauldron out for everyone to see, and it'll be I'm sure, an explosion of new questions soon.
I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jeremy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.